Hello, everyone, and thanks for hanging out with us for the Behind the Numbers weekly listen and e-marketer podcast made possible by Basis Technologies. This is the Friday show that reviews the most significant media news stories of the week. I'm your host, Marcus Johnson. In today's show, Americans' attention.
The cost of an annual membership and the saving is so little compared to just getting a monthly subscription that you just don't feel the need to hold on to it for as long as that. And you can just keep changing and moving to wherever the new hot show is.
Ultra-fast grocery delivery.
This really is only applicable to certain parts of very dense cities and not really relevant outside of that.
How many ads should you show viewers?
It's particularly going to be about the consistency that might dissuade users of some of these services rather than just the sheer number of ads that they're served alone.
Gaming beats TV for Gen Zs. What can we expect from the office of the future? And how far does the average American live from their family? All right, folks, join me for this episode. We have three people. Let's meet them immediately. We start with one of our principal analysts who covers everything retail and runs our retail practice. It's Susie David Canyon.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, Susie. We're also joined by one of our principal analysts covering TV and video who runs our advertising and media practice. It's Paul Werner.
Great to be here as always.
There he is. Welcome, sir. And finally, we have one of our analysts on the retail and e-commerce team. You know him as Blake Drosh.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, chap. Thanks for hanging out. So they're the three folks we have for you for this episode. I'll also be here. We'll start with the story of the week. Americans' attention. Where are they spending it? We'll talk a bit about that. Then we'll move on to the game of the week. What's the point? The name of the game we always play because I have no imagination. I can't come up with a new one. Where our contestants, Susie, Paul, and Blake, will give us the main takeaways that they can from each of the four stories we have for you to win the championship belt. We then move on to working from somewhere. We're talking about the office of the future. And then finally, dinner party data, where we talk about random trivia, random facts that we've just recently learned. We start with the story of the week. Americans' attention. New data shows that there's been a pullback from the historically high levels of media audience growth, and in some cases, consumption during 2020, pointing to signs of a slight quote-unquote attention recession in the past few months, writes Sarah Fisher of Axios. The COVID-19 pandemic drove people online even more than usual, as we know. But as things settle down a little bit, media usage has downshifted. Miss Fisher points to cooling broadband subscriber growth slowing down and news consumption being down as well, though I'm sure a lot of that is election related. But like a lot of folks, Seema Shah, Senior Director of Research and Analytics and Experience at SimilarWeb, doesn't think media consumption will go back down to pre-COVID levels. So it's higher than it was. It won't go back down to where it was, though. So where is it? Well, we're going to talk all about different activities and what some of our numbers look like. But I'd like to start, folks. Maybe we'll start with Paul and get your take on which media consumption trend has caught your eye the most in 2021 and why. And this could be, we're talking about watching TV, we're talking about spending time on your smartphone, listening to the radio, watching digital video, all those types of things. Paul, which trends caught your eye the most in 2021 and why?
The ones that caught my eye were the increase in both mobile, and mobile in this case means non-voice, and other connected devices, which in our forecasting is essentially a proxy for connected TV.
And really quickly, mobile is defined as we have smartphone, tablet, all wrapped up into that. And as Paul mentioned, non-voice.
Right. So what this tells me is that the story we've seen with the viewing of video content being kind of bifurcated among your smallest and your largest screen, that continues to happen. And, it certainly happened in 2021. 2020 was an anomalous year, but now we're kind of getting back to pre-pandemic footing.
Yeah, that trend jumped out to me as well. Time spent specifically on smartphone will go from just over 3 hours pre-pandemic to just over 4 hours by 2023. So 2019 to 2023, those 4 years, 3 hours to 4 hours. It's just when you thought people couldn't spend any more time on their smartphone, they said, wait a second, I believe I can. Susie, how about you? Which media consumption trend has jumped out to you the most this year and why?
For me, the thing that's jumped out the most is the subscription churns that you're hearing about from the platforms like Hulu and Roku. Mm-hmm. And I'm not really that surprised because, as we know, everybody is enjoying being social and getting off a screen and doing other things. And I'm also not surprised because if you think about, and we've talked about this before on the podcast, if you think about the cost of an annual membership and the saving is so little compared to just getting a monthly subscription that you just don't feel the need to hold on to it for as long as that. And you can just keep changing and moving to wherever the new hot show is.
Yes. Digital video. I mean, we talk so much about social networking. Digital video, though, rules the roost in terms of activities. In terms of time spent on digital video, twice as much time being spent on digital video last year, the year before that, this current year, next year, the year after that as well. So digital video time spent, double that of social network time spent, and growing. 2.5 hours of time spent using digital video by digital video users in America, that going to 3.5 hours by 2023. Paul, that's quite interesting. You cover TV and video for us. It's quite interesting that number is going up by an hour and continuing to increase when, to Susie's point, there is a lot of churn between these services. One would have to assume that there's a lot of viewership going to AVOD services because people do have somewhat of a limit on how much they're going to spend on SVOD.
Yeah, definitely. And it's been documented. There have been a couple of research studies that have shown a pretty substantial increase in time spent on ad-supported video. And then, you have the migration away from linear TV. So that viewership is going to go to a combination of ad-supported and subscription, but it's all going to be digital. So it makes sense that, we're seeing these numbers increase so much.
Blake, what's your 2021 media consumption trends and why?
Yeah, I mean, mine kind of really goes off of all of this is it's the intersection between social networking and digital video. If you look at what we saw across the board this year in social networks, time spent being down by a little bit over 1%, probably a given due to how much time spent spiked in 2020 because of the pandemic. But Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, which are sort of the three core social networking websites, all seeing drops this year, with TikTok and to a slightly lesser extent, Snapchat are the ones that are seeing the gains. And then obviously that has to do with the shifting tides between how younger people are using social networks. But I think it also speaks more to sort of the merging of social entertainment, which is largely grounded in video, and how social network users are generally spending a lot more time now with the entertainment factor, mainly driven by TikTok on social networks, than they are with the Facebooks and the Instagrams, which are primarily used for keeping in touch with your friends and family. So I think that overall, the takeaway this year is sort of watching that gradual churn towards all of this type of media, digital media, really bleeding into each other. And I think that's something we're going to continue to see with the numbers going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really interesting one. Two jumped out to me real quick. One was the pandemic set a new watermark. Total media usage was at over 12 hours a day. That was 2019. The pandemic bumped it to over 13, and there it will stay. 13 hours per day using media. We should note that if you're watching TV and on a smartphone at the same time, we count that as an hour for each. But regardless, that's still a pretty impressive number. 13 hours per day using some kind of media. And the second thing for me was the tipping of the scales between time spent using digital and traditional media. That's quite interesting. In 2017, it was a 51-49 split, as time spent on digital slightly edged out traditional, 51-49. Traditional, we're talking TV, radio, print, things like that. Fast forward to today, it's a 60-40 split to digital. In 2 years, 64-36. So point being, digital did overtake and kind of ran away with the title in terms of its share versus traditional. However, traditional is incredibly resilient, and at this rate would still account for a quarter of media usage by 2030. That's a very unofficial forecast, according to my pretend extrapolation, but still incredibly resilient. If you think about how far away 2030 seems, also kind of seems like it's around the corner, but it's still quite far away. Still a quarter of media usage would be going to traditional by that time. Really quickly, folks, I wanted to talk to you about 2022. Ian Olgerson, Research Director at Kagan and Media Research Unit of S&P Global, expects growth in 2022 to tail off even more so than it has already in 2021 in some sectors. Paul, start with you really quickly. What media usage trend will you be keeping an eye on next year and why?
Well, what jumped out at me about 2022 was first that it returns, or, it's less than 2020, which, as I said, was an anomalous year. So that makes sense. It's quite a bit more than 2019, which means we're, kind of like back above pre-pandemic levels. But here's the part that's interesting to me is that looking ahead to 2023, we're going to see drops in total media time spent in both of those years. So I thought that was kind of interesting because if you look back at the history of, at least since we started tracking this in 2008.
Back in 1847.
Yeah, it's generally been increasing. I mean, there have been a couple years when there was like a slight little dip or flatness, but generally the trend has been going up. So I was a little surprised to see, the projection to 2023 showing that we're going to see a couple of consecutive small drops in those years.
Absolutely. Susie?
Sounds like retail to me, right? Where you have really high comps one year and then it's hard to keep that same level of momentum, especially after such a banner year. My other thing, which I don't know if we can answer this question, but are the streaming services providing more original content per year than the original, more traditional media channels? Because that too might impact why you're seeing that shift to the more digital use cases versus the original broadcast stations.
Yeah, there's definitely more content flowing to or created for digital platforms than traditional ones.
Blake, how about you?
I think that when we think of how quickly new platforms and new trends emerge, even though we are sort of on the cusp of 2022, I would just caution that, there's really nothing in 2023. We don't necessarily know what's going to pop up and maybe inflate one of these numbers, whether it's a new social network or a new, video streaming. So I think when, you look at 2022 for certain, I think that the more interesting trends here is looking at how much room there is still to grab, particularly within audio and video from traditional, because you spoke about the resiliency of the traditional numbers, and I think that that's certainly true. But what Susie was saying, just about as the dollars and the investments and the creation of more and more original content starts to come from these digital natives, then I think that it seems like there is a lot more potential. Whereas with the social networks, I don't really know where you go with that. I think people generally spend a finite time, communicating with each other. And certainly what I was speaking of in terms of the social entertainment value, potentially stealing share from digital video, I think that entertainment, there's a larger ceiling, but then maybe, social networks, all the various platforms fighting over a piece of the pie that I don't see getting terribly larger, considering how much time people already spend on social networks, is going to continue to be interesting.
That is it for the story of the week. Time now for the game of the week. First, a quick word from our sponsor, Basis Technologies. Today's podcast is made possible by Basis Technologies. Basis Technologies has created a digital advertising platform that connects people, automates processes, and unifies channels, bringing together programmatic, site direct, search, social, and CTV in one single interface. And through the power of automation, Basis enabled brands, agencies, and publishers to build and operate a healthy, secure, efficient, and profitable advertising organization. Ready to take control of your advertising? Just go to basis.net today. That's www.basis.net. Basis Technologies, the future of advertising has arrived. Folks, we are back. It's time now for the game of the week. Today's game, what's the point? Where we read out 4 stories and have our contestants, Susie, Paul, and Blake, tell us what they think is the main takeaway of the story. Okay answers get 1 point, good answers get 2, and that feeling you get when you see 2 older folks who are still crazy in love, answers that give you that feeling, and give you 3 points. Each person gets 20 seconds to answer before they hear this. Whoever has the most points after 4 rounds wins and gets the last word. Don't be surprised if Susie loses the game. Blake, welcome back. Blake's back after a 2-week suspension from the game of the week. He got ejected last time, had to pay a $50,000 fine, but he's back with us. Welcome back, Blake.
I'd like to apologize to my fans, to the organization, and most of all, actually, you know what, Marcus, we'll see what happens before I apologize to you.
Thanks, mate.
First
Good to
of
have
all,
you back.
I don't know that I want to play if you've already decided I've lost.
Yeah, I decided a long time ago.
That's
Let's
not
play the
nice.
game. Story one. We start with Paul. Ultra fast grocery delivery. Doordash is getting into ridiculously fast grocery delivery. The delivery app is running a small pilot in New York City's Chelsea neighborhood that delivers purchases within, believe it or not, 10 to 15 minutes. Kia Koklacheva of Axios notes that DoorDash customers within the new service's delivery radius can order items for $1.50 fee and get them delivered by a courier on an e-bike. The company plans to expand to more parts of New York City in the coming weeks and months, and eventually to other cities. Ultra-fast grocery delivery, Paul, what's the point?
Well, grocery delivery is sort of like the new takeout. I mean, when you order groceries online now, you want them instantly, so that makes sense. But as the writer of one of these articles pointed out, this really is only applicable to certain parts of very dense cities and not really relevant outside of that. The other thing I would say, and this is going to lose me the game of the week, giving Susie a much better chance of winning, is that I think the future of this is instant delivery, as in instant coffee.
Oh. Extra points for Paul. Well played. Susie, you're up.
I want to win. No, I'm just joking. I don't need to win. I'm a winner. It's fine. I don't need this. What I do want to say is that between Blake and I, we can talk about this forever. So I will keep it to the 20 seconds we're allowed, which is instant and or quick commerce is what we are all talking about. It is like the new table stakes when it comes to pantry items and convenience. The Adweek article had all the buzzwords all of our listeners need to hear: instant gratification, impulse buying, new expectations set for consumers, and convenience. And it is no surprise that DoorDash is doing it. It's kind of like how MasterCard is now doing a buy now, pay later offering, because all the incumbents have to do what the new tech savvy people are doing, companies are doing.
For folks listening who haven't listened before, if you've heard Susie before, you know she's pretty competitive. But before the episode started, she was talking some serious trash.
That is not true.
I informed her that she probably will lose and she should prepare herself. And so that's why we're talking.
Paul, thank you for lobbying for me. I really appreciate it. You're a great colleague.
I tried. I did my part.
Yeah, it didn't work. Blake.
So I actually wrote about this trend in our 5 retail and e-commerce trends report that was just published. And it's all about how getting consumers used to same-day delivery via digital grocery is going to expand to products beyond grocery, to sort of second-tier essential goods, and how it's also, when you have the quick commerce, the GoPuffs and the Gorillas of the world encroaching on this space, it's going to force companies like DoorDash, Instacart, Uber to create their own fulfillment centers that have their own inventory so they can get customers the convenience products that they need at just as fast as these quick commerce startups can offer.
Blake came to play, y'all. I can't say y'all properly, but I gave it my best. A recent Adweek article cites Tyler Treratola, US co-founder of 15-minute grocery delivery company Joker, saying, "We can have your missing ingredient delivered before you've finished making the recipe, or get the drinks you want to take to the party to you before you leave the house." So yeah, seems like why would I need things in 10 to 15 minutes? But there are some compelling use cases.
The most compelling use case to me would be if IKEA gets into this and then basically they deliver your table within like 15 minutes, but it still takes you 3.5 days to figure out how to put it together.
I just wanted to know, did Blake win that round?
It seemed like it.
Yeah, it was pretty. I feel like I feel like you know deep down in your soul, Susie, that you did not win that round.
No, that is not fair.
Well, I think Blake crushed it.
Do we even talk about who wins individual rounds? I thought we just waited till the end and did like
we normally don't, but that was so definitive. I might as well give Blake the belt now. Round 2. We start with Susie. How many ads should you show viewers? Ad-supported streaming services continue to try and find the right amount of ads to show per hour of programming, as they try to balance advertiser demand with audiences' frustration, notes Tim Peterson of Digiday. No more than 5 minutes of ads per hour for Peacock, and no more than 4 minutes of ads per hour for Discovery Plus and HBO Max. But Rakuten's ad-supported streamer Viki, on the other hand, has opted for an especially light ad load of 2 minutes per hour. Rakuten's Viki will likely expand the number of ads it airs per hour of programming eventually, resembling a light dimmer approach when you dim the lights, as opposed to a light switch, notes Mr. Peterson. Susie, how many ads you should show viewers? What's the point?
I think the point is that services and TVs in general, like broadcast TV in general, need to better understand how to adapt to the new consumer behaviors. And so I love this idea around the binge app format, right? And using data to better understand when you're going to capture the attention of your audience so that you can charge the advertisers accordingly. I think it's brilliant.
Blake.
I think anybody who watches any of these ad-supported services knows that it's not all about the number of ads that you're served. It's about the repetitiveness of the same ads and just weird ad placements where sometimes you'll be watching and you get thrown into, 4 or 5 minute period where you're just being shown all of these ads over and over again. So I think it's particularly going to be about the consistency that might dissuade users of some of these services rather than just the sheer number of ads that they're served alone, because it's way more complicated than that.
Paul.
I definitely agree with that, Blake, but I'm also going to make a prediction here that the ad loads are going to creep up. If you remember when a lot of the live TV digital services rolled out, their whole proposition was that they were going to cost less than your cable package, and that really did not turn out to be the case, and now the pricing is comparable. I think with ad loads, we're going to see a similar creep where, now they're all saying, oh yeah, we'll do a small ad load, but over time the ad loads are going to increase because they're going to need the revenue.
Move to our third story. We start with Blake. Gaming beats TV for Gen Zs. Gaming is increasingly becoming the central medium for Gen Zs globally, notes a recent Advanced TV article. For the first time in the UK, gaming is sitting above TV in Gen Z's list of personal interests, 48% versus 47%. And in the US, 14 to 24-year-olds, Gen Z people in this instance, cited playing video games as their favorite entertainment activity, beating out watching TV and listening to music by 4 points. Watching TV was the clear-cut favorite for all the other generations, according to this research from Deloitte. So, Blake, gaming beating TV for Gen Zs, what's the point?
Yeah, I think, this probably has a lot to do with how this question was posed. And is it really surprising to anybody that, television or watching TV is not going to be popular among a generation who is known for cord cutting and not watching linear television? However, I would caution against gaming. Gaming, yes, obviously very popular, but more popular among all of Gen Z compared to social media and YouTube. I'm not exactly sure that when you include those platforms in a survey that gaming is going to exceed all of them, even for Gen Z.
Paul.
Yeah, I think to Blake's point, it's a more complex question than just saying, TV versus gaming. I mean, Twitch is a platform that now combines a lot of these things and is showing a lot of, more pure video. And I think when people answer these surveys, and they may not think of something like TikTok or YouTube or even Netflix as watching quote unquote TV. So I think it would be good to know a little bit more about the survey questions and even how people perceive the questions.
Susie.
I think the point is that if you don't have original content, whether it's a game or a TV show or a movie, and you don't have experiences that go with it and that delight your viewer, then you're going to lose. And so if the Hulus of the world or the Netflixes of the world are not producing cool, fun content that is geared towards this generation, then gaming will win.
Move to our final round. We start with Paul. Facebook tests giving users more control of the newsfeed. Facebook says it is introducing new features to give people more control over what appears in their news feeds. So users will be able to turn the volume up or down on posts from friends, family, pages, and groups. Things like that. Some US lawmakers recently tabled a bill named the Filter Bubble Transparency Act, designed to make sure social networks give their users an option to use the sites without any kind of algorithmic interference. Facebook has added one way to access a chronological feed since March of this year, but it's not turned on by default. Paul, Facebook giving users more control of the news feed. What's the point?
Well, they've already tried to do this. They've already done it, actually, and it didn't seem to stick. The real point here is that no matter how many options social platforms give users, people don't tend to exercise those options. They tend to just kind of like go with the default. They don't really pay a lot of attention. And then they get stuck with whatever the algorithm is doing. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it quite a bit, but I really don't think that just the act of giving people options means that the problem that those algorithms create is going to suddenly be solved.
Yeah, people always take the path of least resistance. Susie.
Well, and I think to add on to that, I would say the algorithm is a black box that nobody understands. And I think that whatever Facebook says now, nobody believes, basically. And so it's not a great combination in terms of transparency. And then they even talk about a study that they did where they removed the algorithm altogether. So no options, no nothing, just removal of the algorithm, and saw a lot less usage, and it was not sticky. So it's like everything that they're saying is harder and harder to believe. So really, what is the point?
Blake.
So yeah, the cynic in me would obviously say that the only reason that Facebook is introducing these tools is just another PR move in order to sort of pretend like they're giving users more control over what they see. In a perfect world, this would actually be a good thing, not only for the user experience, but maybe even for Facebook and the advertisers on the platform. Getting more data and insights on what users want to see more or less of could ultimately be good for Facebook as a business. But for all of the mentions that all of the things that Susie and Paul just mentioned, it seems a little far-fetched.
So we've got time for the game of the week. This week's winner.
Oh my God.
A drum roll. Sue Blake is this week's winner of the game of the week. Congratulations to Blake.
I was on the edge of my seat the entire time.
I was.
Like nobody ever. Blake, congratulations. You win this week's game of the week, championship belt, and the last word. Go.
Well, before we started, I said that I would consider apologizing to Marcus, which I'm still not going to do. But I want to make another apology. And I know for people who listen to this podcast week after week, I tend to give the British people a hard time. And
really,
I want to make sure that everybody knows, especially for anybody out there in the UK who might be listening, that it's not so much that I have a problem with British people. In fact, I love British people as well as the culture. It's really just Marcus that I'm going after. And I want to draw that distinction. There are many things that I really enjoy about the Brits. And I came up with a short list here as I knew I was going to win the game. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, James Bond, Newcastle beer, Charles Dickens, wearing an Adidas tracksuit to a pub, and of course those funny looking hats that they wear on Derby Day. I love those things. So much love to the British people.
Can we get a shout out for Shakespeare?
Of course, Shakespeare.
Okay, thank you.
This is rigged because he even had a list for the listeners who can't see.
Susie, every time you lose, which is all the time, you say it's rigged. The one time you won, actually you did say it was rigged then, so I don't really know how to fix that.
I wanted to win today.
There's no chance of that. Blake, I've been deflecting British hate mail from away from you since the beginning of this podcast. But now I might as well just rip it up because apparently you weren't attempting to insult anyone other than me.
That's correct.
Nice.
And I want to make that very clear.
Thank you. It's clear enough. Thank you. I heard it. We all heard it.
So basically it's a message for all Brits except Marcus to not take it personally.
Exactly. Yeah. And to be very clear, Marcus is an American posing as a Brit born in Los Angeles.
Okay, moving on. It's like one big hug. Time now for working from somewhere other than where Blake is. That's where I like to work. The office of the future. The office used to be a place where people went because they had to, reads one Economist article. Meetings happened in conference rooms and in person. Desks took up the bulk of the space, but how should they be designed in the future? Its purpose has changed. It's now a place for getting people together in person so they can do the things that remote working makes harder, forging deeper relationships or collaborating in real time on projects. And so what can we expect? Well, the article was posing a few things we've heard before, some things which aren't as frequently mentioned. Fewer desks assigned to individuals, aka more hot desking, maybe desks on wheels, the way to configure the office, different variations based on different events you've got going on, number of people you've got coming in, even lockers perhaps, meeting rooms rooms, more likely to be flexible walls that might lift and slide. I started thinking about MSG when they transform the ice rink where the Rangers play into the basketball court for the New York Knicks. Number 2, shared areas, neighborhoods where people in a team can work together. Number 3, areas set aside to showcase teams' work so others can get a sense of what they're working on without having to actually see the team in person. Number 4, more space for socializing and events. For example, bars in offices. And Robin Claire Avia of architecture firm Gensler says she is seeing lots of requests for places like large auditoriums. And number 5, for meetings to work for both virtual participants and in-person folks, I expect to see more camera screens and microphones. And at Gensler's New York offices, they feature mini meeting rooms with a monitor and a half table jutting out from the wall below it, with seating for 4 to 5 people facing the screen. Number 6, data. Property and HR managers will want more data to understand how facilities are being used, which days and times people are bunching in the office, what that data says about health risks, contact tracing, if a colleague tests positive for COVID, things like that. Folks, bunch of ideas in here. Any thoughts on these ideas or what you think might be the biggest attraction for you in terms of the redesign of the office of the future being something that's going to compel you to come back in?
I think all of those ideas sound interesting, but they all cost money, and that brings up the kind of like unspoken thing about the future of offices, which is that companies are going to have to basically save on overhead if they want to open up their budgets to do things like, rent an auditorium for an event or rent a space where 2 people who happen to live in the same neighborhood can work together, or even like a party room or something. So to have all that flexibility, which I think people would appreciate, you're really going to have to kind of like restructure the economics of real estate and, the very high cost of office rents.
Yeah, The Economist was noting in reality, pragmatic considerations, how much time is left on the lease, the physical constraints of the building's layout, uncertainty about the path of the pandemic will determine the pace of change. Whatever happens, the office won't be what it was. I think you're right there, Paul. They're going to have to do something very different to free up those budgets to make those changes. And I think a lot of it might just come down to to The Economist's point, when do leases end? And I think it could be interesting to see in a couple of years' time. I mean, the pandemic's still relatively new in the grand scheme of things. Will next year, the year after that, will we start to see some of those office leases coming to an end? And then what happens? Do people decide to just re-up, or are we seeing people moving to more rural spaces or smaller spaces? It'd be very interesting. Any other thoughts, folks?
Yeah, I think for me, this is a lot like a very parallel to the retail store is dead from several years ago. And we know it's not dead, but it's just about how do you delight, so in this case, the worker, and how do you surprise them, and how do you give them an experience that they can't get at home? And with, I think one of the articles started with, the work is a destination that now might bring COVID. And so how do you make sure that you get someone out of their bed to come and potentially catch COVID, right? And so if you think about how do you create a compelling enough experience that I may get sick, but that it's worth it, I think that's just how office managers and buildings need to think about it now.
Yeah, great point. Blake?
Yeah, I would agree too that if we do bring up this conversation around leases, I think companies still don't really know exactly what things are going to look like long term. And given how long commercial leases tend to be, I don't see any company rushing to, install a bar where their IT servers used to be right now. Not exactly especially when they're not 100% confident, what the makeup of their in-office work culture is going to be like, 2-3 years down the line, because we're just learning now that we're realizing slowly but surely that, this is the COVID transformation is going to be a process that's going to be, 4 or 5 years, and things are probably going to be in flux for the long term, a lot longer than we initially expected or initially were hoping for. Not to say that we might not come out on the other end in a scenario where things are better, people are happier, but I don't think any of us really have a clear idea of what the world's going to look like, especially in terms of in office culture, 3-4 years down the line, which is the extent of a lot of these commercial leases.
Like, Phil, where the hell are the servers? Oh, I installed a craft beer on tap. Did you know?
Well, the sad thing is a lot of these new tech offices already had some of these things, right? Like pool tables, foosball tables, beer on tap, like happy hour carts. Yeah. So it's like, what is that next generation experience that's really going to make some of, especially the younger generation. I'm at the office today. I love coming to the office. You chat with people in real life. You like get some extra scoops that you wouldn't otherwise on Zoom. And so like, I think for me, there is an inherent cool thing about coming to the office from a people connection, but it seems like for some of the younger folks who already got so many perks pre-COVID, they're going to need even more now.
Yeah.
You know, in the office before everything shut down, we had like a giant stash of White Claws. And I'm not a hard seltzer fan, but I still want to get my hands on some of that stuff. And I'm just wondering where it went. Susie, any ideas? Like, did somebody drink it all, or did it still lingering around somewhere?
I will show you when you come to the office next. I can't say it
Oh,
on here.
okay.
Then
All
the
right.
stash will be gone by the time you come back.
Yeah, the purpose has really changed. And I think that iterating on what you had before isn't going to be enough. I think you really do have to like reimagine, like not gut the office, but really think about things differently. Because yeah, just having a pinball machine, you know, maybe offering people, you know, some kind of fancy coffee machine, it's just not going to be enough anymore. You've got to really give people a reason to come in, and not just people, everyone a reason, because I really do think there's a tipping point at which if over 50-60% of people are coming in, you know, yes, there's a lot of people and maybe that makes people more nervous about COVID, but then there's a real reason to come in. If it's just attracting 10 to 12% of the staff, then people are coming in because of people. And if you can't get most people to come in, then it doesn't really seem like as much use in going in. All right, folks, that's what we've got time for working from somewhere. It's time now for dinner party data. This is the part of the show where we tell you the most interesting thing that we've learned this week. We start with Blake. He won the game of the week. Blake, what you got for us?
So this is a YPoll survey. They just did a big survey. They specialize in millennial and Gen Z insights, and this was concerning European Gen Z and millennials' favorite musicians. So I was always interested to see, you know, what's resonating, and this is among 13 to 39-year-olds. So it's pretty wide pool. I would imagine there's a lot of diversity in terms of especially something with music in here. But I thought it was interesting that you look at the top 5 favorite musicians. For once again, this is for European. Number 1's Ed Sheeran. Number 2, Eminem. Number 3, Queen/Freddie Mercury. Number 4, Michael Jackson. And number 5, BTS. Which is interesting because really only 2 of those, Ed Sheeran or BTS are musicians that have been around for like less than 10 years or about that. Whereas like Eminem, Queen, and Michael Jackson all debuted, like I think Eminem is probably the newest of that one, and he came out almost 25 years ago. So I think it's really interesting when you look at sort of the staying power of a lot of these musicians. And it feels like as popular music kind of grows and grows, that newer generations tend to still hold on this affinity for older musicians, whereas that's very different from like something like, you know, my parents' generation, who were listening to like a lot of like popular rock music, but never really like went back and listened to like things like American standards that their parents' generation did. And I always found that really interesting. And it's interesting that that's sort of existed when I was growing up, and it seems like it's still sort of resonating with like the younger Gen Z audience as well.
When you set up that story, Blake, I thought Neil Young was going to pop up on that list.
Now, you know, unfortunately, Neil Young's still not getting the credit that he deserves. But what are you going to do?
So I'm curious to see, well, they probably don't have this, but how much of a spike does the movie Bohemian Rhapsody give Queen? Because with like the Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance, it would have been interesting to see how many people thought Michael was the GOAT before that, how many did afterwards, and how many people thought Queen was the best one of the best bands of all time before the movie and after.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that Queen, before Wayne's World came out in the early 90s, they were like nowhere on the radar at all. So that kind of helped bring them up to a certain scale.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, this biopic a couple of years ago, I think also went even further.
We need someone to do one for the show.
I think it's also worth telling everybody what GOAT stands for. I don't think everybody knows.
You know this. Peter told you last time.
I know.
Go on, hit them, Susie.
Greatest of all times.
No. No.
Shoot, it's not that.
No, of all time. Why did you add the S?
Because time has a continuum, and so I wanted to make sure that
The
it was
greatest
obvious.
of all the times. That is what it stands for. Well remembered, though.
English is my third language.
Good God. That is shocking. It's not shocking I knew that, but as a Brit, that's very impressive. What we got next? Susie.
So I don't have any UK party data, but I do have data from a UK
Then
firm.
don't worry about it. No, don't worry about it. Moving on. Paul? No, go on. I'm sorry, Susie. Go ahead.
I'm getting used to it after I am declared the loser before I even gave my answers. I mean, from a UK-based company called Money Beach. For 2020, they studied Google Analytics for takeaway and what food is most Googled for takeaway, which for us non-Brits, that would be takeout, in 109 countries.
Yes, that's the main takeaway from this story is that the Brits have a different word for it.
For everything. This is...
Yeah, you mean like the proper word? Sorry, go on.
That
Susie,
probably
go on.
needs to be our next dinner party data. How many words do the British think are their own and can use a different word?
They're all our... I mean, 60% of our language is stolen from the French, but aside from that, the other 40% is all original.
Oh yeah, Paul, we did one of the dinner party data that I think it was that French was spoken in England as the official language for, I don't know, am I making it up 300 years?
Pretty long time, yep.
It was a very long time, yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, Susie, go ahead.
Oh, no problem. So can you guys guess what is the number one food item that was, and or nationality, but it's really food item, that was Googled for takeaway?
Italian.
In the UK?
In the over 109 countries on aggregate.
In the UK, curry's the most popular dish, but of the whole world, roughly the whole world. Oh, takeaway. Chinese food.
Pizza. And can you guess how many countries that's the number one?
All of them should be all of them at least.
44 countries. Next is Chinese with 29 countries, and coming in at third, very far below, is sushi with
British
10 countries.
food. No, we didn't make the
No,
top.
British
top
food
three.
is...
Okay.
What is
So
British
close.
food?
Ooh. It's meat packed inside pastries.
Oh.
It's very
shepherd's
tasty.
pie.
It's okay at best. Very cool. Very good, Susie. Who we got? Paul.
Yes, so this is probably the last thing people want to hear about right now or ever.
Oh, good.
But I'm going to talk about political ad spending because I saw some interesting data about projections for next year. And, just to backtrack, 2020, not to anyone's surprise, was a huge year for political ad spending in the U.S. It more than doubled over 2018. So, there was a giant increase. What we're going to see next year is a little bit of a decrease from 2020, but, next year is a midterm year. But it's going to be a very big increase over the previous midterm in 2018. But the part that's interesting to me is that video ad spending is gaining quite a bit, largely thanks to connected TV and thanks to everything we talked about earlier with people shifting viewing from linear to connected. So next year, the projection is that $3 billion will be spent just on digital video ad spending for political campaigns, and that's bigger than what was spent last year in the presidential election cycle on video, which was $2.6 billion. So there you have it.
Wow. Very good. I got two quick ones for you. Susie, don't worry. You said you didn't have any UK facts. I've got some Canada ones for you. Flipping the script.
I feel so special.
You should. You shouldn't. You should. First one, Canada is the second largest country in the world by land mass, bigger even than China, but its population is just 3% the size of China's. Lots of space, Canada. I'm coming up. 9 out of 10 Canadians live within 100 miles. 90% of Canadians live within 100 miles, 160 kilometers, from the Canadian-US border.
The 49th parallel.
That's insane. Imagine if 9 out of 10 Americans lived within 100 miles of the US-Canada border.
Well, you'd have a lot of instant delivery.
We'd all be really
Crazy.
cold.
That's the thing. That's why Joker will never work there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. That's bananas. Anyway, but 8 out of 10 people do live in urban areas. About half of Canada's landmass is covered by forest. Canada. I do love you.
Love Canada.
Love Neil Young.
Love Neil Young. Love Leonard Cohen.
No love for Drake? Nothing?
Love Drake.
Okay.
The band.
Love Rush.
Oh my
Moving on.
God, should I start with the whole list? Michael J. Fox, Jim Carrey,
yeah.
Celine Dion,
All the people.
all
Bieber?
of the Saturday Night Live people. Oh, yeah.
Bieber
Mike
Canadian?
Myers.
Bieber, yeah. Mike
Yeah.
Myers, big time. The guy from Shark Tank, the mean one, Mr. Wonderful.
The guy from Shark. I think if you're saying the guy from, then we've run out of people. Okay? Feel like.
No, Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank.
The Levies, right? Eugene and Dan Levy.
I don't know who
Yes,
that is.
Gene Levy, yes.
That's a strong list.
Yeah.
You got to
that's a
feel
that's
good
a
about that list.
Yeah.
Canadian
Joni,
list.
Joni
Super
Mitchell.
good. Next, I'm going to whip out all of the Armenian famous people. Be ready.
Slow down. All right, I've got one more for you real quick. The typical American adult lives just... Any guesses on how far they live from their mothers? Typical American adult lives just blank miles from their mum.
Male
The
or
average.
female?
The average. It does vary, but this is the average.
Oh, see, I
6
know.
miles, you said?
Huh?
Did you say 6 miles?
No, I said blank miles.
Oh, okay.
Guesses?
Yes. I
What do you mean,
say
yes?
1.5 hours away,
That's not a number.
which would maybe
Blake,
make
Paul?
it 70 miles.
You guys are really thinking about this, or you just...
I don't
not
know.
gonna-
I
okay.
live less than 2 miles from both my parents and less than a mile from the hospital where I was born. So I'm not a very good example of this. Very small gap for me. I haven't made it very far in life geographically.
Well, both. Paul.
You know, I can hardly even venture a guess, but I think Susie's probably on the right track of, 70 to 100 miles range. Is what I would guess.
Blake, bang. 18 miles, according to an upshot analysis of data from a comprehensive survey of older Americans. This was in the New York Times. It notes that over the last few decades, Americans have become less mobile, and most adults, especially those with less education, lower incomes, do not venture far from their hometowns, and this trend is likely to continue, social scientists say, as baby boomers need more care in old age. The growing number of two-income families seek help with childcare.
I wonder if the pandemic and people moving back in with their parents, that's probably going to have an impact on this.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the survey was done before. I don't know when it was done, but...
I'm just pulling it up now because I'm going to look for Susie. This is December. This is 2015. Or some other interesting notes as well. One was culture plays a role. Since Mexican-American households are more likely to provide in-person care for older relatives, while Euro-American households are more likely to provide financial support, according to research led by Natalia Sarkissian, a sociologist studying families at Boston College. And that's significant because nearly 20% of the US population are Hispanic. Number two, there's massive, I'd say pretty massive variations by region. People living in the tri-state area and PA, that area just 8 miles from their mum. Those in Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, that region, they're the closest, 6 miles. Those who live furthest away live between Montana and Arizona, the kind of Rockies in the southwest, 44 miles from mum.
That's because your next door neighbors are like 40 miles away in that region.
Yeah, geography is definitely playing its role. All right, that's what we've got time for this show. It's time now. It's time now for nothing. It's time now for the end. I got excited. I thought there was a fifth segment. God, I've been doing this for too long.
No, you just wanted to spend more time with us.
No, I've had enough. I'm just kidding. I do love hanging out with you guys. That's it, though. That's all we have time for, unfortunately. Thank you so much to my guests. Thank you to Susie.
Thanks for having me.
Go on. What are you going to say?
I was just
Susie?
going to, even though you never let me win.
Yeah. Thank you to Paul. And that's the way it shall stay.
Easy.
You guys see my button?
What,
That was easy.
Paul, what's happening over there? It's
Good
like Home
question.
Alone when the kid plays the TV
Yep.
and the pizza guy.
Thanks for having me. Always
Keep
a pleasure.
the change. Thank you to Blake.
Good to be here.
Apparently there's a new Home Alone out, which my friend said is good. I now don't trust her taste in movies. It might be good. I don't know. I haven't seen it. Thank you to Victoria. She edits the show. Thank you so much to everyone listening. To ask questions, just say hi. You can email us at podcast@emarketer.com. We'll see you guys on Monday, hopefully, for the Behind the Numbers Daily and eMarketer podcast made possible by Basis Technologies. Happy weekends.
Guys, I'm apologizing in advance that I win.
I'm so confused. What are you talking about, Susie?
What are you going to do, Marcus? Stu is in the office. I'm going to go tell him if I didn't win.
Stu already told me that I can have extra points today because my Game of the Week answer ended up in the New York Times.
That is true.
So be careful what you say on this podcast.
It's kind of weird if you don't give it to me because it's right here. I can even go and get it and sell it after, obviously, and show you all the reward.